Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is our second show. It's being filmed on October 30th in the beautiful Memorial Arena in Victoria. We've got a few different guests on the show. The first part of Citizens Forum is called the Walter and Jack Show, and we will try to entertain and inform you about our views about what's really going on in the news and the world. I want to start off with Hurricane Sandra. This is being filmed basically the day after it hit the United States. And I've noticed, and I know you noticed too, Walter, the fact that the media, for some reason, will not use the words climate change in all the coverage. I mean, there's no stop of the talk of disaster, and yet the words climate change, I don't know if I've heard them.
I certainly haven't. I mean, at some point, you'd think they'd have to mention the elephant in the room, particularly right in the middle of a presidential campaign.
That's right. They just had the biggest drought, I think, in American history.
That's
followed
right.
by a record-setting hurricane, and the entire election is being carried on without ever saying climate change. It's amazing, and not that it's any better in Canada. It's just as nutty here. And I think that kind of puts a bit of focus on how serious of a problem we are in. Like, we seem to be moving away from reality.
Well, you'd think perhaps that there'd be a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, and in the past you might have been able to say that, but really in the United States we know that the system is constipated. Nothing's happening in Washington. They can't pass any legislation of any sort, of any meaning.
Well, I think they passed lots of legislation, like they passed the NDAA or something.
Yeah, that's right. Legislation that might help the environment or help the public or create peace in the world. That type of legislation that you'd think a government could do. You're right. No, yeah, it is business as usual for every other way, and we shouldn't forget that there's no limits on campaign spending in the United States now, and it's just going to the highest bidder. Basically, who can put the most money in can pretty well purchase the election.
So who's going to win then? Will it be clean coal or will it be clean natural gas? And speaking of clean natural gas, here in Victoria, or here in British Columbia, we are right now building a secret pipeline across northern BC. I call it secret only because I think most people don't know about it. It's to carry fracked natural gas from northeastern BC to Kitimat, the same place as where the Enbridge line is going. In fact, it parallels the Enbridge line, very, very close in some places. It's supported by the Liberals, it's supported by the NDP, and it's supported, it seems, by the media because nobody will tell us about it. Incredible, again, that these kinds of things can get pulled off without the public even being told.
And let's not forget that it's being supported by elements of the environmental movement and the Green Party, some people in the Green Party, for instance, the same manner that the run-of-the-river projects were being touted as being a solution to finding clean energy by so-called environmentalists, but all the evidence is pointing otherwise. We can see where these projects are multi-billion-dollar projects. They're huge infrastructure projects that will ultimately cost us money, while the large corporate interests, laugh all the way to the bank.
Yeah, and here we are, these massive natural disasters, the drought, now the hurricanes, and here in Canada we've broken all kinds of difficult weather records too over the past couple of years, and yet pipelines are being built, more and more cars. We've got to turn away from this. We've got to turn away, and yet it's not even being mentioned. It doesn't seem to be mentioned as an election issue here. Well, the Enbridge is, but not the other one.
Well, I saw last night an ad for fracked natural gas, saying that it was going to inject $1 trillion into the economy. And I don't know where they come up with those sort of figures, but they're spending a lot of money in the corporate media right now to convince the public that this is a good idea. But there's just simply no scientific evidence to support this. And we know, for instance, we just had a pretty good sized earthquake that was centered in Haida Gwaii, and we also know scientifically that fracking for natural gas causes a lot of earthquakes. So do you think that's a good idea to be up there drilling holes and poking things into the ground? It's very, very polluting. We all know that the horrible things that this is associated with. But the public, I think when you're trying to draw all these issues together, when we just start talking about the Hurricane Sandy, and now we're off onto these other issues. The thing is that they are all connected. We're left speculating, the general public, trying to find evidence. We're left to our own resources often by going to the internet and such. But in the end, the public has to make these decisions, and we have to make an informed decision. And I don't think that's going to happen as long as you can have a corporate media that does something like they're doing with the hurricane reporting, not once ever talking or speculating even that perhaps this is associated with climate change.
And never mentioning the pipeline that's being built right now across northern BC. By the way, it's called the Pacific Trail Pipeline, if you want to look it up, Pacific Trail Pipeline. And how about FIPA? Talk about things that never get a mention anywhere. This is, FIPA is the Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement. I mean, here they are, and we've already signed very close to 24 of them. Right now it's getting a bit of coverage, certainly on the internet, because the next one is going to be signed but between Canada and China. China happens to be the biggest economy, but we already have them with Russia. I read the list of countries. I don't want to say any in case I get one wrong, but 21 at least different countries. And nobody in Canada knows anything about this. They're binding for, or at least this next one is going to be binding for decades. Where are the politicians? Why aren't they holding meetings in our communities to inform us? Where is the media? And how in a democracy can a prime minister who obviously does not work for the people of Canada, how can the prime minister go around the world signing agreements that we know nothing about?
Well, how about the fundamental question, Jack? What is it? Why are these agreements needed fundamentally? Is to get around sovereign nations and their laws, and their protection of the environmental integrity and protecting of workers' rights and all that. We have our governments, of course, to create legislation and laws to do our bidding. I mean, basically to help us organize a society. So no matter how these, I wouldn't say large corporate interests, but these governmental interests like Harper, no matter how you phrase it, in the end, they're creating these so-called agreements to get around laws and rules and regulations that we've set up over the past 50 or 60 years, and we're always coming out on the short end. So, I mean, who's kidding who here? I mean, any agreement should be fully discussed. Political parties should run on platforms of saying, if we're elected, we're going to want to move forward in this way of signing these agreements.
Actually, they do say that, and then after they win the election, it turns out that they were lying to us.
Yeah.
One thing I would really like to see in Canada, I think this is extremely important, would be a citizens' assembly on democratic reform in British Columbia or in Canada. A citizens' assembly is just a coming together of maybe 100 or 200 citizens, picked, it can be at random, and given a question to answer or a topic to come up with answers with. A citizens' assembly on democratic reform, that's what we need. Our democracy is very, very weak and fraught with problems. It simply doesn't work anymore because all the power in our system now goes to the single person at the top. The Premier has tremendous amount of power provincially, and the Prime Minister has the power federally. All the rest of the people we elect are not even in the game, and we citizens are completely out of the game. So I think, you know, we need an honest media. We need a media that's going to tell us what's going on, and we need to improve our democracy so that what the people of Canada want starts to count for something again. But let's move on to another topic. Something more local that I know you're very interested in, and that is Wi-Fi in schools. So it seems that a decision is going to be made soon on school district number 61 right here in Victoria about more Wi-Fi, or I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of issues. Of course, this is a worldwide movement to put wireless internet technology in every building and on every street on the planet. But when you're looking at, for instance, the issues around putting wireless technology in schools, it's a very special environment. You have young children who have very, you know, their health threats are different than for adults. They're in the development stage of their brains and their bodies. Very, very special care should be taken to be ultra sure that their environment is safe.
Okay, but
schools.
The federal government, the provincial government, and the media are always telling us that Wi-Fi is completely 100% safe. So why should anybody be worried?
Well, basically because there's no independent evidence from independent researchers. And now I'm saying there's none, but you know, there's just hardly any evidence whatsoever being brought forward by true independent researchers that points towards this type of technology being safe.
Is there evidence that shows it's dangerous?
There's several thousand studies, and we've talked about this many times, that you know, if anybody wanted to, for instance, look at the Bio Initiative report, it's available online, that lists a couple of thousand studies, mostly from independent researchers.
Showing that? Showing
there's harm, starting from...
Harm from cell phones?
Well, cell phone radiation, radiation from Wi-Fi, radiation from smart meters. Generally, all wireless type technology operates more or less in the same frequency range and has more or less the same biological impacts.
And there is a biological impact.
Well, biological impacts of all sort. I mean, if you, for instance, if you were to reference Dr. Klinghardt in Washington State, where he's plotting the rate of the increase of autism in children. According to Dr. Klinghardt, autism is doubling every 5 years. So do the math, Jack. You don't have to be very smart. At that rate, all children will have autism. If we don't change the environment in which those people are living, their parents or their children, we could have a catastrophic...
Is there evidence that this type of radiation causes autism?
Certainly there is. There's studies that show a higher incidence of autism. The study that I just recently read about, I haven't seen the abstract on, but parents or women who are exposed to wireless technology while they're pregnant were 3 times as likely to have an abnormally developed fetus that could lead to autism or to other problems. And they're particularly talking about autism. But we're looking at the whole range of health issues, starting with these very, very serious brain diseases, but we're also talking about heart issues, and we're talking about your standard diabetes issues, and also symptoms of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, and all these sorts of diseases. There's lots of studies that show association. But the thing is this: we have a medical health officer in this province that's telling us, according to the Centers for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, Health Canada, that there's no cause for concern. But what he's doing there is he's quoting the same sources time and time again. When I asked him about where his sources were coming from and what material he was using, he provided information to me. Each time we saw serious conflicts of interest and serious flaws in the research that was well documented by researchers in mainstream media. And in the end, when I asked Dr. Kindle, who's the Chief Medical Health Officer, what other sources he had for information, He did not answer my requests.
So, but I believe your group presented him with close to 1,000 or perhaps over 1,000 studies, scientific studies, showing risks associated with this cell phone, Wi-Fi, smart meter radiation.
Jack, time and time again, he's been inundated with research. There's hundreds of people working on this issue in this province. He's simply stoically ignoring reality.
Okay, so I think, I mean, to me, there's no question. To me, I believe that there is a risk associated with wireless fidelity, with cell phones and with smart meters. Personally, I don't want to be exposed to that risk. But even if you do want to be, do we want it in our schools? I mean, I would say unless it's shown to be completely safe or almost completely safe, absolutely not. We don't want it in the schools. So is it going in? What's happening now?
Well, firstly, I just want to follow up with one thing. I know that some of these statements sound pretty far out.
No, they don't sound far out at all.
You and I have been talking about this for years. But for our viewers, I'm challenging the viewers to go and find the information. Find and show me the research that shows this technology is safe. I would love to see it.
Can you give people a few places where they can go, just a few websites or even keywords where people can...
For general information on the harmful effects of electromagnetic radiation, a good website is the Citizens for Safe Technology. Citizens for Safe Technology, just the way it sounds, all together. And that'll bring you to an excellent website in Vancouver, and they cover a whole range of topics around exposure to electromagnetic radiation.
To me, it's like smoking, and I think 20 or 30 years down the road, we're going to realize it. It'll be too late for a lot of people, but...
Yeah, let me make a couple more points before we move on, because I think it's important that the school board here in Victoria is about to make a decision, much like the Blue Bridge decision, much like the sewage treatment plant. They're determined to plod on in the face of reality that says that it's a bad idea. And here we have in Victoria, we have a school board that's evenly split right now, by the way, and there's some progressive people who have been elected, but there's still some old hands there that will not budge on this issue. And we have to impress upon them that this is not good for the students. There certainly is not enough information, not enough information that shows that this technology is safe.
Now, is there, for example, can you do a wired situation instead of wireless in the schools and come up with the same result?
Certainly, there are large institutions all around the world, universities and tech schools are all hardwired because the technology is more reliable. It handles a lot more data. The technology is less expensive to operate. It's much more robust, much stronger, and harder to damage.
Okay, so we don't need Wi-Fi in the schools. We can give students exactly the same tools by simply wiring it in.
They're going to be carrying in their laptops. They have to plug them in to make them operate anyway to charge their batteries, plug an internet cable in, make it entirely safe. So we're not talking about either we have high-tech and technology in schools or not. We're talking about just doing it another way. Yep. And matter of fact, it's better. And the bottom line is too, Jack, wired technology is less expensive than wireless technology. Less expensive to purchase, less expensive to operate. So there's just simply, as you usually see, that when you see some technology that's bad for the environment, it usually ultimately is more expensive. That there seems to be some laws of nature bringing it in, and they have to realize that they're going to spend a lot more money to get this get computers in the classrooms. There's absolutely no evidence, by the way, that having computers in classrooms improves or the education and the outcomes of students in their abilities. There's no evidence to show that. But why I'm bringing this all up and wanting to talk about it today is because the school board is going to be making a decision, School District 61, coming up, I think, around the mid to late November. And I'm urging the school board to consider the evidence and to perhaps dismiss a lot of the evidence being brought forward by the electrical industry and by the wireless industry And Jack, I'm working on this right now, but there are some very close associations between the wireless industry and members and active
Let's not go there right now.
We
Let's
can't
not
talk
go-
about
okay,
it
okay,
today,
okay, okay.
but let it be known that there are major issues here that we have to address.
Okay. So what can people do?
Go to a website. Go to Citizens for Safe Technology.
Contact the school board?
Contact the school board and ask them to come to their senses.
So School District 61 in the white pages or the yellow pages, I guess.
A good website
Okay.
is Safe in School. Again, just as it sounds, safeinschool.org, and this is an excellent website to look at the major issues around Wi-Fi in schools.
So safe, SAFEIN, school.org.
.org.
Okay.
Now the thing
Go
is, in Saanich, in their great wisdom, they have now banned wireless technology from elementary schools up to grade 6.
In Saanich?
In Saanich, School
I didn't even know
District
that. Like, how can that happen? And we don't even know.
I know.
Wait, Saanich School District number 63
63.
has banned it,
Yeah.
and School District 61 is thinking of going ahead?
Yeah.
And nobody's mentioning this? I mean,
No.
this is the first I've heard.
Now the
Is
use
this-
of language is we have to be careful. Let's say there is none in elementary schools up until this point, and they have no plans to install any
Okay.
in the future.
But
we
they
can't
are
say
going to
banning.
install them possibly in elementary schools in School District 61.
Yeah, well,
And-
that's the big part of the debate is elementary school and those kids, those poor kids having to suffer through
You high
this.
schoolers are on your own. You're only okay. Thank you, Walter. Just before we run out of time, I want to talk a little bit about unions. There's been a lot of public sector labor issues over the last year or so. Teachers, BCGEU, and in the BCGEU there are thousands of people who in certain sectors of the union making $14, $15, $16, $17 an hour. The living wage in Victoria is about 18 something an hour, so there's thousands of BCGEU members not making what's called the living wage here. I don't know, in different parts of the province the wage is different. But, you know, being in a union, and I'm in a union, being in a union these days feels like you're kind of a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know, it's been a losing battle for 20 years. And I think it's time that the union leadership started to win some of the fights, or maybe do better for the membership. Now, I'm not going to say anything negative about the people running BC's biggest unions, but I think it's time it's time we started to win. Because, for example, I mean, what's the biggest argument against wage increases in BC for public sector workers? It's the deficit, right? The government keeps telling us there's a deficit, the media keeps telling us there's a deficit, and so public sector workers, too bad, there's no money for you. But the only reason there's a deficit is because of the tax cuts put in place by the Liberal government since 2001, which are costing the provincial treasury now somewhere between, I would say, $4 and $7 billion a year. Various numbers are used, but let's say between 4 and 7. Let's take the low figure, $4 billion. The deficit this year is about 1 point something billion. So really, we should have a $2.5 billion surplus in this province every year, not just this year, every year for the last 5, 6, 7 years. There should be money. I think the union leadership knows that, you know, what they should be saying, the argument that can be made is, to the government, you are taking money away from public schools, you're taking money away from hospitals, you've treated seniors in a murderous way, you know, and people in care homes, just terrible treatment. And many public sector workers are living at below living wages, and you've done all that to give tax cuts to the richest people and biggest corporations in the province, because that's where the money has really gone. And I don't understand why the unions won't make that argument.
Well, you know what a great union movement is, Jack? The people of Quebec, the province of Quebec, when they wanted to keep tuition fees low and they were going up against their government, which is just another corporation in many ways. They were on the streets every day in, day out, week in, week out. And they had resolve, and they changed their government. And when the new premier was elected, the very first thing she said is, we're freezing tuition rates. She knows what the public sentiment is. And by the way, she also declared that there'd be no fracking for natural gas in Quebec.
That's right, and that didn't get a mention really.
Hardly a
media.
whisper.
Yeah.
But the thing is, unionism is when people get together and people have resolve. And I think the biggest problem is that even the members in the union don't have that sort of resolve. And if you don't have it, of course, the other side can see that and they'll wear you down. But, you know, there could come a time when the public will have had enough.
I would like to see a union cable television station extending right across Canada. There's a golf station. I think there's a fishing station when you turn on your cable. I mean, there's hundreds of cable stations. I don't understand why the union movement across Canada doesn't have a cable station, at least putting out their points of view, because they got a lot of good points of view to put out. And they should have a newspaper, at least a weekly newspaper across Canada. You know, they can do these things, and I think if the union movement wants to start to win, and I think it's very important that the union movement does start to win some fights, then you've got to have media. The other side knows this, which is why they own the media. And, you know, people, please don't buy the line that, you know, the big economic or financial problem in the country is high union wages. We know where the money's going. The money is going to the people at the top. It's not going to unionized workers. Walter, we didn't get onto smart meters. We got 1 minute left. You want to just blast it out there?
Well, you can't have a day go by without me talking about smart meters, and I hope the public by now knows that, you know, smart meters is the new program that BC Hydro is implementing, in which they're going to put wireless technology in all homes and businesses in the province. And
it's dangerous, I believe.
Oh, there's evidence, astonishing evidence, that, well, we're talking about using wireless technology in the same manner as cell phones and Wi-Fi in schools.
They're fighting it on Salt Spring Island right now, I believe.
Yes, Corex is the company installing the meters, and the attack is on Salt Spring happening in the last week or so. There are activists over there doing everything they can to keep them from going in. As I mentioned last week, there's about 1,000 meters that are locked and protected, but there's a lot more that are vulnerable, and there's a lot of intimidation going on by Corex and their representatives.
That'll be story number 1 next week.
You wish it would be, you know, and
in the media. Phone your media and tell them you want to hear about this story. It's a good story.
Exactly.
Less crime and violence, maybe a little less on sports and entertainment, a little more on the important issues.
And it's going to help us with democracy. The issue here is that we haven't asked for this technology, and they've foisted it upon us.
Okay. We're out of time. Thank you very much. That was the the Walter and Jack Show. Welcome back to Citizens Forum. This is part 2 with politically engaged Victoria citizen John Farquharson. First of all, I'd like to thank our volunteer camera people who are doing the filming of this community television program, and also the Shaw staff who are running the show, fortunately, so somebody knows what they're doing. We're gonna talk a bit about sewage
again,
and democracy, sewage and democracy. John, you just told me an interesting piece of news. Maybe you can pass it on to everybody.
Well, again, I'll put my what's that called? Full disclosure here. So I'm working with Paul Somerville. He's the federal Liberal candidate. And I had occasion to go down to the CRD building and meet with some, top echelon political people and top echelon bureaucratic people around the sewage project, because Paul's a bright guy, has a PhD, but he can't make sense of why this project is going forward. And he's read a lot, but he still can't make sense. So we marched off to the CRD yesterday to try to make sense and get them to help us understand why this was going forward. And it was an interesting meeting. We're there for an hour, And basically in response to why it was going forward was the fact that the CRD directors are liable. They've been told by the federal government that this must go, and if they don't do it, they'll be basically held in non-compliance and be fined. Apparently they're liable for fines in the $300,000 or $400,000 range and actually could go to jail.
So when the federal government tells you that you have to build a sewage treatment plant, then you have to do it, and if you don't, then the people running that part of the city government are individually responsible potentially for fines of hundreds of thousands of dollars and potential jail time as well.
Yes.
To me, the most amazing part of that is, as somebody who's been following this issue for a while, I've never heard that fact mentioned before. It seems absolutely remarkable that we don't know this.
Yeah. Well, that was the very first fact that was presented to us as to why this was happening. Very first fact. It is happening because we were told to it, and if we don't do it, we're all liable for, huge amounts of fines and possibly going to jail for non-compliance. And so that got the conversation started, and then we pursued this a bit further. Certainly, being on the hook for up to $300,000 and going to jail is certainly an issue for these CRD directors, for sure.
Well, it's a huge issue.
Yeah,
I just don't understand why nobody's told us this before.
Yeah, well, you heard it here.
Yeah, you heard it here first
on your show. The other major issue that Paul went with was, can you cite the scientific evidence in support of this project? Can you provide us with the name of one reputable, objective individual with the proper credentials who would support the science behind this particular project?
So can they provide you with the name of one scientist who says that we need sewage treatment here in Victoria?
This project is sound, that it's founded on the best evidence available, and it should proceed on that basis. And we were told, no, we don't have a name for you.
But I understand there's quite a few scientists who say that, and I'm somebody who supported the idea of sewage treatment for many, many years. I don't now because I've just heard too many questions raised, and as you say, a lot of scientists are saying that we do not need it because we happen to be in one place in the world where the ocean does a very good job. There are environmental costs for bringing it onto the land, and if we do that, the end result may be worse than whatever it is we're doing now.
Well, I'm not going to sort of project as to the disaster that might unfold. I'm not that well informed technically about the downside. All I know as a taxpayer, if somebody can't provide me with the name of one independent scientific source that supports this project, that makes me a bit cranky. Why are we going ahead? Because the federal government has said that we have to, and if we don't, we're into non-compliance. And so I began to think about the poor CRD directors being faced with this. But then I thought, well, gee, just last week, CRD director Councillor Vic Derman and CRD director Mayor Niels Jensen of Oak Bay, again, would be liable, I guess, for going to jail and large fines for non-compliance. Yet they came out and said, we have to stop this project until there's a full environmental assessment and a full cost-benefit analysis done.
So we're talking about the proposed sewage treatment plant for Victoria that's moving ahead, and now, there's certainly questions about whether or not it's needed, and now, so Vic Derman and Niels Jensen are saying that before anything moves further ahead, they would like to see a full environmental impact study and a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I didn't know that until you told me, and I'm wondering why. I know everything about the NHL, the lockout. I'm fed every detail about that, and a lot of other issues that I'm really not that interested in. Every crime is reported, but I don't know why I don't know this stuff, and I wish the media would do a better job of telling us. It's important.
I think it's very important. And if you ask the people that we were talking to, the CRD, why is there no such study? Well, because they had never been asked to do such a study. And even if there was such a study out there, it really wouldn't make much difference because they are still under orders to proceed with this, or else they're going to be fined and potentially put in jail.
So
Other
that's the sewage part of this story. Now there's the democracy part of this story. And
well, the democracy part you've hit on, like, why don't you know this?
yeah.
There's a group in town, Open Victoria. They're a nonpartisan group, and they have called for a town hall dialogue on November 20th. They've rented Oak Bay High School auditorium, and they've, as of today, invited two of the CRD directors who have come out publicly in support of this project, and two who haven't come, who are against it, to come and provide the citizens who want to attend with help them gain an understanding and make sense of it. It was much like, it's the same question that Paul Somerville had. Yeah, I've read and I've listened and I've heard, but I can't make sense of it. So that's what this forum is about on November 20th. And we're hoping to hear back from both those, again, two representatives, or Representative 4 and their technical specialist, and a representative from the CRD who is against, plus their technical specialist. And then we'll have a public, a town hall dialogue. Not a debate, just a dialogue. Let's get behind the thinking here. Like, why are we doing this?
I really hope that something like that could be filmed and maybe shown on this very community TV station, because it sounds like it would be a very useful and important bits of information that people in the city should know about.
Yeah, I understand it's going to be live streamed.
Okay, live streamed is good.
Live stream is good, and I'm not. And then I think the technical details are still being worked out.
Okay, okay. I think we've finished the sewage issue, or is there anywhere else you want to go with it?
No, that's how's your time? How's our time?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
We can talk about any issue you'd like, from the Blue Bridge to amalgamation to anywhere else you'd like to go.
Well, amalgamation has been out there, and at least one of the current councillors have picked up on it. Councillor Gudgeon was I thought quite bold in organizing a forum a few months ago to have a bit of a dialogue about this, and I think it's, again, one of those issues where people need an opportunity to have their say.
As things stand now, do you support amalgamation or not?
Well,
I'm opposed to it.
Yeah, what I support is the opportunity for people to participate in like a referendum. I'd say at the next municipal election.
And that would follow. I mean, because once again, I'm opposed to amalgamation, but I have a very limited number of facts and figures at my command about it. If it's something that works, I wouldn't really have an objection to it, but I see a lot of downsides. Personally, I like the small cities.
Yeah, the city.
I like the way we basically can know our city governors if we care to, although you still wonder at some of the things they do, even in the smaller cities. But I think if we had one large region, or maybe two or three, which seems to be the plan, the citizens would be even further away from their city governments, and that's not where I want to go. And we can work efficiently together. They do it in Portland, where they've got even more municipalities, cities, and regional districts. And Portland is one of the most progressive American cities. Yeah.
No, I mean, you've identified some of the concerns, for sure. And again, I'm undecided. But one of the questions that was asked at this forum was how many people think that if a random bunch of individuals were asked, here's a chunk of land called the CRD, how many municipalities do you think we should divide it up into? Do you think it would really be 13 or 14 or whatever it is currently? So that was an interesting question. And if you let people have a say in a referendum at the next municipal election, along the lines of, would you be in favor of amalgamating with one or more of your, sister fellow municipalities. Get it out there. Get the conversation going. And it may be that we now we'll have 13 municipalities. We may have 6.
Sounds like you do support it.
No, I'm not.
You're open.
I don't support it. Again, I support the notion of a referendum, and I support the conversation, the dialogue that allows people, me, you included, to get more information, to get the dialogue going. And I think a referendum would be a wonderful way to do that.
Yeah, I'm definitely for that, and for the educational process that goes along with it. Last topic, I just want to mention how unfortunate it has been for this city that on the Blue Bridge project, we have lost the rail bridge that could have brought, I don't understand why the downtown Victoria merchants aren't screaming at the top of their lungs, because what we could have is a rail system running from Langford to downtown on the E&N every day, dozens and dozens of trains bringing people from Langford to downtown. And yet now the downtown merchants, their own city government, has removed the bridge that completes the link. It just seems absolutely bizarre. We're out of time. John, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
We'll do it again.
Great.
Thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back to Citizens Forum, Part 3. Our guest in this part is Cameron Moffat. Cameron is, can I say, my osteopath. I was in an accident a little over a month ago. I was riding my bike and got hit by a bus, not a city bus, but a big charter bus, and injured my shoulder and my head. And a few people told me I should go see an osteopath. And when, I was still groggy after the first couple of days, but I wanted to find out if I had a break anywhere, and people said go see an osteopath, and I was quite surprised. I didn't know what an osteopath was or what an osteopath did, but I found Cameron, and I'm very glad that I did. And we're going to talk about osteopathy. So Cameron, maybe you can tell me what an osteopath is and does.
Well, it's manual medicine. It's a form of manual therapy that is based on anatomy and physiology and a high degree of palpation. So we do actually feel the tissue, the organs, the injury, the disease state, and treat it. What we don't do is treat symptoms. Classical osteopathy is focused on certainly listening to the symptoms and using them as part of the roadmap, but not using them as the point end of treatment. We're always looking for the reason that in your case, the reason for the injury was quite clear. It was a bus. But in the case of chronic issues or a flare-up of something physiological, we're looking for the reasons why it happened. And quite often, what's interesting, one of the reasons why I like this field so much is it's quite often not what it seems. Most backaches that I treat, I very seldomly ever touch the back, assuming the person hasn't fallen off of a ladder or been hit by a bus. But if it's a chronic backache, I treat most of those backaches usually through the stomach, through the organs, through the pelvic region. Right shoulder problems. People may have heard of frozen shoulder. It's a symptom where the right shoulder just locks up. I'd say 8 out of 10 of those cases that I work on, that issue is being driven by the gallbladder, because the gallbladder refers up into the shoulder regions, and it will lock up the muscle tissue and give the illusion of a frozen shoulder. When I drain the gallbladder, put them onto a gallbladder cleanse, change their diet a little bit, and quite often reduce coffee and increase water, lo and behold, that shoulder starts to move, and I may not even have touched the right shoulder.
That's amazing.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting work. Yes, I'm very happy to be doing it.
Now, I'm assuming that it works for a lot of people.
It does, and if it doesn't work, then I usually refer out to somebody who does. And I'm recently new to Victoria, and I'm in the process of building a network of referrals of people that I know are of high quality, good caliber practitioners, and I'll refer out then, usually within about 3 or 4 treatments. Both the patient and myself will know if it's working. If it's not, then the referral outwards. Or sending them back to their allopath, back to their physician for more diagnostics. Let's get some ultrasound, let's get some x-rays, let's get some blood work, something.
What are the issues that people would usually go to see an osteopath about, and where you could help them? What are the issues that make people
Running with a bus.
okay? Well, what I liked about seeing you was that I think we didn't do anything that didn't have to be done.
Yes.
I mean, I had an injury, but it kind of healed by itself. You gave me a little bit of treatment, but basically I think the story was it's just going to sort of heal up.
That's one of the tenets that is really important in the osteopathic training, and they do drill this into our heads over the years, is the body has an innate wisdom to heal itself. Like any living plant, tree, human, we will strive to find balance. That's where osteopathy is similar in some ways to traditional Chinese medicine. They look at yin-yang and the balancing. We look at balancing out the physiology to help the anatomy. So sometimes less intervention is actually better for the person. Over-treating something is not part of the osteopathic model.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'm lucky I have a general practitioner, my family doctor, who also feels along the same way. And
yes, that's great.
But so who would be coming to see you? I mean, people with back pain, it sounds like, or?
What I'm finding here in British Columbia, because osteopathy is fairly new to this province, people are coming first off at the end of everybody else. So they've been to see their massage therapist, they've been to see the naturopath, the chiropractor, they're coming to see me or the other osteopaths in the city, mainly out of frustration. They're not getting anywhere. And what we're seeing is a lot of backaches, headaches, and my particular interest is the digestive system. So I am getting people coming in who have heard that I can help with digestive issues.
For example?
Constipation, heartburn, reflux, gastroesophageal reflux disorder, which is known as GERD. All those phenomena have a huge impact on the rest of the physiology of the body. If you're not processing the food you're eating, you're not assimilating it, and equally as important, you're not eliminating it, then your whole system starts to fall apart. And when the digestive system becomes inflamed, irritated, etc., then you're looking at a whole myriad of physiological problems to the point of even increased blood pressure. If you're dealing with a reflux and your whole esophagus is inflamed, that esophagus is sitting very close to the heart and the lungs, and those organs are all wrapped in fascia, all wrapped in a connective tissue that binds everything together. When that gets inflamed, that fascia starts to tighten down on the various organs. And if it happens to be your heart, then the fascial bag around the heart is called the pericardium. When that tightens around your heart, your blood pressure is going to go up. And so I deal with people who have been in car accidents with the, with the seatbelt, and they've impacted on the sternum, the ribs are out of alignment, and that soft tissue is now tightening down, and 6 months later they're now having problems with blood pressure. It's really simple to correct that.
That doesn't sound simple at all.
Well, it's a lot simpler than taking drugs.
Yeah.
A couple of treatments, getting the rib cage to start moving again properly, allowing that fascia to ease off so that the heart now can beat within that volume of space, and the blood pressure comes down.
Now you've moved here from Ontario, and I think you said in Ontario osteopathy is a fairly major form of practice.
It's much better known. The two colleges that originally were in Canada treating osteopaths that started up in the mid-90s, the early 90s, were both in Ontario. So of course the students graduating tended to stay in that area, and by the 2005 there were a lot of osteopaths practicing, osteopathic practitioners practicing in Ontario.
And I guess with some success and attracting a lot of clients.
Sure,
yeah.
Yes.
So if people have headaches, digestive disorders, pain in the back, I know someone who had a knee replacement or hip replacement and is seeing an osteopath and feels that the after surgery situation is much better since they've started to see an osteopath. I guess many different things.
I can tell your viewers an interesting story of a hip replacement. I had a lady come into my office back in Ontario who had a hip replacement, and she was quite irritated, quite angry, because she still had all the pain even after the surgery, and the surgery was successful from the orthopedic point of view. At the end of the second treatment, I was positive she had a gluten intolerance. a severe gluten intolerance. And I mentioned this to her, and she said, no, I've been eating bread all my life. She originally came from Germany, and as a young woman in Germany, she was eating a lot of bread. What she didn't realize is they have a different type of wheat over there than what we have here, much higher in gluten content. And at the end of the third treatment, I said, well, we're done. And she said, well, I still have pain. I said, yes, you're going to until you get off gluten. And so she dug her heels in and she said, all right, I will quit gluten now. This lady was in her mid-60s, so it was a bit of a deal. And she left the office rather grumbly. I said, come back when you've been gluten-free for 3 weeks, 21 days. She came back about 4 weeks later, and I knew she was doing better the minute she walked in. First off, she was smiling, and her eyes, the white in her eyes were now clear. She had beautiful, clear eyes at this point, and they weren't before. And when I went down her assessment, I started feeling various areas that I had worked on before. I stood back, and I said, how are you feeling? And she said, you know what, you're a bloody genius. And I smiled and said, why is that? And she said, I have no hip pain at all. Yeah. None. The colon is the beginning of the large intestine, the cecum. And that area, when it becomes irritated, refers pain right back into what the chiropractors call the SI, or the sacroiliac region, right on the right-hand side about your belt line, right by the hip. And when that area becomes irritated, all the muscles in that whole region start to tighten up. And if you tighten up anything in a joint, it will grind itself up. And that's what happened with this lady. Over the years, the last maybe 20 years, her hip had started tightening up, and it ground the joint up. And the muscles were still irritated, regardless of the new hip or not. Now, she was out walking in her fields with her border collies, and she hadn't done that in 15 years. And that was just the effects of gluten.
So there you have it, folks. I mean, it seems like osteopathy can be an answer for a lot of different things.
One of many of the practices that are available in Victoria. You know, osteopathy is not a cure-all for everything, but it's certainly a different way of looking at problems, particularly when they're chronic. It offers a different approach. And yeah, I'm quite happy to be doing it.
Are osteopathic treatments covered under extended health plans here?
It's getting better in BC. Since I've been here in the last year and a half, we have approached many of the extended health care companies, and they are coming online very quickly. So yes, most of them are covering it now. And we're even working right now with the Department of Veterans Affairs and getting coverage for vets.
Now, when I came to your office, it was either the first or second time, you told me a bit about the story that osteopathy actually used to be very common in North America, I think. And
United States.
And in the United States. And maybe you can just briefly tell us the story of what happened.
Yeah, the Spanish influenza, 1914 to 1918, of course, devastated the world's populations. And by about the 1920s, the U.S. Congress decided to have a look at recovery rates. And at the time, there were osteopathic hospitals throughout the U.S. I think there was about 5 or 6 of them in operation. And the recovery rate in those hospitals was around 80%. And in the allopathic model, the allopathic hospitals, the recovery rate was around 12%.
And allopathic is
current
what we call Western medicine.
Western medicine, yes. That set off a big investigation as to how they should bring osteopathy into the forefront even more. And I'm not sure exactly what happened. I wasn't there, but the allopaths won, the osteopaths lost, and they most of them went to Great Britain.
So you mean, I think you told me the laws in the United States were changed to make it much more difficult to practice osteopathy.
They actually outlawed homeopathy in this act, and they made it much more difficult for osteopaths to practice, so many of them left.
So if we think the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Senate aren't doing good work now, it's been a long time since they haven't been doing good work.
Yes.
Cameron, thank you so much for coming on. I think I found it informative. I hope everyone else did too. And you know, maybe people can think if you do have, especially I guess long-term chronic problems, osteopathy may be the way to go. We've got a little bit of time left. Any last comment?
Well, you know, I would be interested in coming back and discussing more specific items. I know many people are right now struggling with gluten. It's a big topic in our food chain as to how much gluten is appropriate and how much is in our food. that is having a big impact on our culture right now.
Okay, let's
very
pick
negative.
a couple of issues and do it on a future show.
I would enjoy that.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching Citizens Forum. I hope you've enjoyed it. I can be reached at jetkino@yahoo.ca. Once again, I think the fundamental problems in our society are we need more of an independent and free media, and we definitely need more democracy in this country. And more democracy means that what the citizenry wants at least plays a role in the directions we're going in, and that's not happening now. I think it's got to happen in the future. Once again, thanks for watching Citizens Forum.